interesting progress that's been made in India. And then we're going to do a little bit of tool sharing at the end to hopefully give some more practical tools to help continue your work. So half of this is going to be big group discussion and half of it is going to be you guys discussing amongst yourselves about what's going on, hence the funky setup of our room. So any questions or anything? No? Okay, great. So I think a most important starting point here is just that we're all here for the good of the children we serve. That's just our basic, that's where we come from. That's our first understanding. And despite that being the case, there is often times when kids are not safe in our programs. And that's every program, despite how well-intended you are. And not just kids, but volunteers, staff, referees. You know, you can't help it. It's an inevitable part of the kind of work that we do, especially when we're working with vulnerable children, powerful children, but oftentimes vulnerable children. This issue can be exacerbated. So about I would say the early 1990s, sport in general, not sport for development, but just sport, started to think about the ways in which athletes, coaches and otherwise, were potentially facing risk in their programs. And sport for development was a bit slower in picking this up. And I would just say in the past probably 5 years, there's been a lot of traction and a lot of progress. So that's that's our starting point. Before we get into some of these examples, everybody has a piece of paper on either their chair or a chair nearby. So we are just going to, if you wouldn't mind to grab a writing utensil and that piece of paper. And I want everyone to just take 2 minutes to answer this question. And we're going to collect them. You don't have to put your name on them. I just want us to start to get in a bit of a reflective mode about this topic that we've got in front of us right now. So, what is the greatest challenge that you're facing in creating a safe space for your sport program? And if you are not running a sport program yourself, it could be in addressing your study issue. If you're an academic, it could be in funding in this space and working with partners. If you do capacity building, so just give a moment and think about that, and then we're going to collect all of these.
Repeat it possible?
What's that?
Can you just repeat it again? Repeat the question?
Repeat the question. I would be happy to repeat the question. And it's also there in case you need to see it. What is the greatest challenge you're facing in creating a safe space for your sport program, for the participants in your sport program? And please be specific. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. And please grab a piece of paper on one of the chairs that nobody's sitting in and answer this question on the projector. And if you don't run a program yourself, or you're welcome to write it from your own vantage point.
Yes.
Okay, is everybody finished? A couple more. Okay, so the purpose of that was just to kind of get us to think about our own situation and why we might be in this room right now. And also because I'm really curious, and I come from a journalism background back in the day, and I like to just take temperature and see what's really on our minds. I think, you know, okay, so let's start. I'm going to talk a little bit about an ASAP India project that we did together. And then these guys are going to give some examples from their own organizations of work that they've been doing. So ASAP, raise your hand if you know what ASAP is. Okay, so let me start with that. So ASAP is the Australian Sports Outreach Project. And ASAP is basically the Australian government doing development initiatives and helping in different countries. Specifically, they several years ago started a program in India where they're working with 6 organizations to help improve their sport for development and help promote sport for development in the country, in India nationally. So they partnered with these guys, Magic Bus NAS, Special Olympics, UNICEF, Life Saving Organization, and Goa FA. We're partners in the group. So they were beyond the grants that ASAP was giving and trying to promote this. They were also doing a series of capacity building for organizations. So at our kickoff meeting, we asked organizations, what kind of capacity building do you need? And there was several options in a menu, and child protection and gender inclusion were 2 of the top areas of interest in need of help and support. So Women Win was brought on board to help the organizations think through some of the challenges and do some strategic planning with really the idea, specifically, here were the 3 objectives of the work in child protection and gender inclusion. So one was to help build the capacity of both the Secretariat, so the governing body, as well as the partner organizations to do this work. And the second one was developing an implementation plan to help get partners to move in their own process and their own journey in these areas. So Magic Bus is an organization that was founded on, child protection and gender inclusion being part of their absolute pillars of existing. These are cornerstones of existence of this big organization. So they're very different than, say, Goa FA, who is just at the beginning of their process of thinking about child protection in a formal way, in a systematized way. So it was trying to work with organizations to move a little bit further. And most importantly, it was to facilitate ongoing learning. So peer-to-peer discussions and progress. So when ASAP came or went, or Women Win came and went, that somehow India Sport for Development has progressed in this area. And it's been an amazing, amazing 4 years that we started about 4 years ago on that. And the progress, these guys will give you some more in-depth look at what that has actually entailed. But it was really, I think, a huge investment and a bit of a leap, because really safeguarding and child protection was not being talked about to this degree, and ASAP really believed in this. So, and I got the privilege of doing most of the technical capacity building. Maria Babanreith, who was on the plenary, and myself and a few of our other Women Win teammates. So that's what we set out to do. To first start this work, there's probably, close to 2 million beneficiaries in these partner programs. So this is huge, and they're all over India, and they have all kinds of different challenges and issues. So, when we sat down and said, how can we help? We really figured that we had to create a collective vision together with this group of people. So what we did in 2011 is just agree what our current state is. So what are our actual challenges? Do we have policies? Do we have practice? What about training? How does this work in our M&E? What about our communications? What are our biggest challenges of getting female coaches in a country where there's very, very low level of participation of females in sport in the first place? So all these kind of questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to be in 2015 in any of this stuff as a group? And then we created a roadmap for how do we think we can get there together. And it's been a really collaborative process that included lots of regular meetings and strategic consulting one-on-one and so forth. In doing this strategic planning, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You guys probably have done your own strategic planning at your organizations and otherwise. But we had to kind of answer the next level of questions of, specifically, what are the issues that we can work on given this time with these organizations? And this is kind of what we came up with as far as the process goes. First of all, our vision that we all wanted to get behind was that we want children to be safe and free from harm when they're in the care of our sport program. So that's what we thought we could influence, and that was our kind of North Star in doing all of this work. And then it took months, and we came up with a set of guiding principles. So these were about 20 or so principles, everything from service delivery to things like abuse won't be tolerated, respect for diversity, all kinds of principles that we could all agree on that really were completely invested across all of our organizations. And then the priorities for action, we developed policies and processes together. We worked with organizations to become more fit for purpose to actually deliver on those, implementing policy and so forth. So that was kind of the framework that we worked in for this process. And I now want to turn it over to these guys to talk a little bit about, first Vivek, if you don't mind, and then or Bobby, doesn't matter, to talk about kind of where you were at the beginning of this process, what some of your greatest challenges were, and where you are now, including both some of the highlights of that process and or your journey in safeguarding sport in your programs, and as well, what are the things that you still have out there that still need to be addressed that, it's not quite, it's always a work in progress. So, Bob, you want to take it away?
So Sarah's questions are very neat. My response might not be that neat, because one of the things we've learned in child protection, at least in implementing our policy, is that sometimes something seems to be going very well and we can tick a box on a piece of paper, but then you discover things along the way that make you untick that box and go back to square one and start all over again. And in the beginning that's a bit disheartening, but you pretty much realize that's what you're going to have to do always, because you're always responding to what you see on the ground regarding what is it that poses a risk or a threat to the lives of children, and what is that you have to do as a response to that. So, like Sarah shared, one of the pillars of our program is a safe environment. So the fact that the ground on which children play must be safe, that the mentor must have an appropriate relationship with the child, that there cannot be any yelling or shouting, and certainly no amount of physical punishment on the ground, that has been pretty much integral to our processes. So a lot of us, the program for several years did child protection almost unconsciously, just as a part of the program, which was a really good thing, because when we started documenting our child protection process, we actually asked people to put down what they were doing in the field, and the first draft of the policy was that. But subsequent to that, numerous people worked on the policy, including staff at various levels, and then we had people in senior positions, including our CEO, who was very involved in the process, giving in very strategic points, taking organizational stands regarding some things, and I think that helped a lot. The other thing that also helped a lot at the policy formation stage is that we had complete support of the HR. So HR was not a bystander to the policy, they were involved in the writing of it. And they offered suggestions, for example, especially about grievance redressal. Once a complaint comes in, what should you do? What should be the pathway to address that complaint in the organization? And I think to date, that continues to be our biggest strength in the organization, that it's so integrated into, they're clapping for me right now, yeah? It's so integrated in whatever we are doing. And not only at the level of the program, but also at the level of the institution, because HR is so closely involved. The other thing, which is something that Women Win and ESOP pushed us to do, was to put people responsible, some people responsible for child protection. So the organization decided that whoever was HR, was head research and development, that person would be the child protection officer of the organization. So it doesn't depend on the individual, it's about the position that you hold. So it gets written into the job description of that role. And the same thing is being done actually, because we wanted to federate this a little bit, because obviously you can't hold it centrally when you're reaching out across 15 states to 250,000 children. So at each state, the person who's in charge of the operations of that state, next to the state head, that person is the child protection executive for the state. And what that has helped us to do is to speak to individuals in the system and ask them regular questions about the status of child protection in their area. And over a period of the last couple of years, the reports that we have got every quarter have become more revealing, more reflective. And it's a really small thing actually to say that the reports have become more reflective, but for me it's the biggest achievement that we have. That people are actually writing down what's happening on the ground. So for instance, somebody asked for a child's phone number. Yeah, this is according to our policy is not an okay thing. But once we surfaced this, we also realized because our program is so embedded, right? The person who is the mentor also lives in the same community. There's going to be some kind of an overlap. So we can't just say having phone numbers is a really bad thing and you can't be doing that and you can't have numbers saved. Or we can't make a blanket statement on that and not say something positive and supporting at the same time. So we're still working that out. I don't know yet. There's a lot of things I don't know yet, and I don't think, we haven't talked about this a lot in the organization, but this came in from Andhra Pradesh just a few days ago, that mentors are saying, we also live here, and it's okay for us to have phone numbers. It's not a bad thing, and why are you guys making it out to be such a bad thing? So we're going to have to talk about it. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I think it's going to be interesting nevertheless. I just wanted to talk about a couple more things. So the other thing that's happened with us that's been quite interesting is that there's been, like I said, there's a high commitment to child protection within the program for those 2 hours that children are with us, because we feel we have control over that space. But it's really, really challenging because things are happening outside of that 2-hour space all the time. The most difficult part is when we partner with schools, because it's tough for us to get into partnerships, especially with government schools. And you get into a partnership with a school, you go in there, you have a child protection policy, you're conducting a session there, and the teacher that's monitoring or supposed to be in charge of that period, she's kind of walking around with a cane in her hand. And anybody who comes in is going to ask me, what kind of child protection is this? And I have to say, look, I can't just tell her, you can't have the cane, you can't have the ruler. It has to be a conversation, it has to be over a period of time. It has to be a negotiated thing with the school that I'm working with, or the NGO that I'm working with, or indeed the community that I'm working with. And I think these kinds of things become really difficult for me to negotiate, because I started out with an ideologically very strong position on child protection. I'm realizing that I can have that position as an individual, that's fine. But if I'm trying to help people to implement child protection, then I have to be open to talking all the time. Like even on questions which I might find entirely stupid, like why can't you be the child? Well, that's in somebody's head, that's a perfectly legitimate question, and I've got to be able to engage with it. I think that's something that all of us are learning all the time. And the toughest one perhaps right now, given the changing nature of the world, this is something that you were concerned about as well when you framed the questions for your session. The internet and photographs. It's really hard to tell people, and for our program staff especially, to tell people who come in a position of power, as funders, as visitors, as important people, as friends of somebody, difficult to tell them, please don't take photographs. Yeah? Because they sign a policy, they sign a 2-page policy in which there is something that clearly says, don't take photographs. But it's hard for us to enforce that. So we try, and sometimes we fail and we go back retrospectively and get consent. But these are all areas of growth. So the purpose of sharing so openly was to say that we've done it for a while. We're very proud of how far we've come. But that there are perpetual grey areas, and we're struggling with those. And that's why we value the support of partners like Women Win and NAS, because it means the conversation can keep going and we can keep learning.
there anything left? Because you have stolen all the points I have thought about, I should be sharing at this platform. But yeah, talking about NAS, we've been working with children for the last 16, 17 years now, and child protection is something which is integral to all our programs. And we sincerely believe that it's all about programming. How do you program your sessions, your overall, how do you make sessions more inclusive? How do you make safe spaces more accessible to adolescent girls? Because as Avobi also mentioned, it's not about only your sessions. The girls need to travel. The girls need to travel to your spaces to play and enjoy, because that's the foremost thing we want them to do. We also followed the same methodology, and what we realized is that since it has to be children-centric, so we thought, why not start a conversation with the children? What do they think child safeguarding means? Because we may come up with any fancy terms or any fancy document or policy, but it may not be relevant at all with the children. So we were really struggling, how do we start this conversation with adolescent girls? That's where these cards really came handy to us, thanks to Women Win and going to school. These cards really helped us start the conversation with adolescent girls. I can give you some examples. Like, we asked children, is it okay if a coach shouts at you? What do you think, guys? Is it okay?
Some context.
If yeah.
So in some context it might be okay because the kids have come through that kind of experience, not in a negative way. I mean, in a positive way.
Right. But most of the girls said yes, it is okay.
That's how we see that.
Because they were of the opinion that they are seniors, they have more knowledge, and if they are doing something which will probably help us improve, it's good for us. So this is completely okay, for a coach or any senior member of the staff to shout at us. But when we, drill them through this and we poke them more about this sensitization, the girls came up, no, there can be better ways of handling the situation. Yeah, so we asked them examples. What do you think that, if let's say somebody's coming late on a regular basis, so what we used to do, the coaches used to ask them to, run around. Since you came late, you're disturbing the sessions, you should not supposed to be part of the session, you should better be either sit out or, just go for some punishment running around. But then we asked that, could there be any other way of handling the situation? Can we look at empowering these girls so that they realize the importance of starting sessions on time and they are not left out because of these because they have their own reasons of not coming, on time. So we simply made them, point of contact who will be taking attendances for the session. So they realize the importance that they need to lead this peer group. So they need to come early before the session so that they can do their these leadership opportunities which they are getting. And this way we have managed to address a lot of things. So that's how we approached, and we have come up with a safeguarding mechanism. We have come up with our own policy as well, the child protection policy, which is not at all this much thick. It's just 10-page outline of what is essential for the program and how it's going to be implemented. If I talk about the challenges, definitely we are sharing all the similar challenges. The most important one is the reporting. Because in our culture, it's very difficult for a coach to report back that I'm not doing something which is not, supposed to be there. So it's very difficult to get the reporting, especially about the harassment and abuse. Physical injuries, we still manage to capture a lot of them, and we manage to address them. We have a redressal system to handle the physical injuries. But when it comes to abuse or harassment, that is where we are still struggling. So we need to still work a lot. We need to learn from other organizations how probably they are handling this major concern for the program.
Great, thanks you guys. That was.
And of course, the social media, as she mentioned, because it's not about the funders going and clicking pictures or the volunteers going and clicking pictures. the cell phone, the camera phones, even the participants have the phones. They click their own pictures. Like if I go on ground, they want to, get clicked with me, and they want to. When I open my Facebook page, I see my picture, on Facebook. I don't know how can I stop that, because everybody is linked. I don't even know, who is linked with me, or it's a mess, honestly speaking.
And it's quite famous. That's the problem. Actually, most of us don't have that problem. It's just really.
Well, I'm the only male member of this, adolescent girls program, so yeah, I happen to face this problem quite often. Thanks.
Thanks, you guys. I think that was such an interesting profile of what's going on in your journeys, but specifically all the different points that you touched on in this panorama of what it means to keep our programs safe, from social media to, it's not just that 0.001% of the time that there's a perverted coach, but there's most of the time what we're talking about is very pedestrian, everyday bullying, excluding kids, glass on the pitch, all first aid kits, all of the just bread and butter of doing our work in a very day-to-day manner. So anyhow, thanks. Definitely talk to these guys outside of the session if you have more questions for them. I wish we had time to do some of that right now, but we don't. So we are going to now spend some time with you guys kind of talking amongst yourselves. We're doing a reverse Q&A because I don't like to be in the hot seat, so now you're going to be in the hot seat. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. You guys are going to get in groups of 4. So I would ask those of you who are not working directly with children, so your funders, your academics, your network organizations, or whatever all else, for you to spread yourselves out so you are in a group with other people who are working directly with children. Several of the questions that you're going to be answering could be answered from any perspective, but I think that will make for a richer discussion. We came up with about 11, I'm not sure how many groups we're going to have, but different questions that are very specific to sport for development and safety and inclusion issues. So for instance, I'm just going to read you one. How do you ensure the safety of children when working in environments or with third parties where you don't have full control of the program? Like Havovi's example of working in schools and corporal punishment in schools. So you're going to sit down with your group and you're going to talk about this issue and whatever your question is and try to answer it. So we're looking for the 3 top highlights from your discussion. So someone should be nominated as the reporter. You're going to record your top 3 highlights and report back afterwards. So we're going to have about 10 minutes of discussion and about 15 minutes of feeding back. So your feedback has really got to be 3 bullet points. No diatribes, no ranting, just kind of what you hear as the 3 top answers to your question. Any questions? No? Okay, so first just take about a minute and organize yourselves in groups of 4, please. And we will, once you have a group of 4, we'll pass out one of these questions.
How do we segregate the funders and the...
Just move yourselves around. And better if you're not with someone. Better if you're not with someone from your own organization.
I'm not participating.
I know.
Okay.
Did you guys get one yet?
When organizations have child safety policies and processes in place, there is a common problem of low reporting. Safeguarding systems, but it's
You want me to write? Good, you guys. The question was to see
so basically you have the systems in place for and I think we can do well, that's right.
We have a child safety policy. Yeah. That's exactly what's policy in places actually quite easy. Just implement.
Common, we just talking about competition. Getting feedback of the volunteers.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? Staff, yeah, just drop it down. Let's put on point. That's one thing.
It could be anything, you know, any environment.
You know how that's how you make
How far? You're the best.
Yeah, like why do you think that is? Why do you think that they're not why aren't personally, I think a lot of where you were the solution is that the children themselves don't understand people think that's not
I basically like things that more not much but what we do as I said is we took one elder staff member. Like there's one volunteer coming, one elder staff member is already always volunteer is coming one experience and the main is teaching. Like for example, male teachers teaching we can see they are also a team of they don't stay in a single room. They see how far the facilities are, like toilets, bathrooms, wash stations. How far they are basically check out the environment. Specific staff depending upon the children. Basically, we see how many female children go for it, so how many numbers of children, how many quality is maintained, but
Okay, we've got about 3 more minutes.
gender sensitive.
What's acceptable? It's not acceptable. You want to get that percentage. Regardless, because that's showing that it's okay.
But in that case, boilers is providing
Okay, are we ready to wrap it up? If you don't have 3 bullet points and you've only nailed 2 of them, that's fine too. We'll go with what you have. Unfortunately, we're short on time. Okay, so raise your hand if you're going to be reporting back.
Yeah, there's something like one of the is that who's reporting back?
No one can be especially when I was trying to get everybody's name.
That is
Read them all out right now.
Wow, I thought you
I'll do a lot. No, I wrote a lot. It's bad handwriting. Definitely.
Reporting back to your organization.
Okay, fantastic. So we could probably talk about this for a good hour to 15 hours to 15 days or so, because this is clearly really complicated and there's a lot of moving pieces to it. But in the interest of time, I'd like for each person who's going to report back, if you could start, please, by reading the question that your group was addressing, and then in as succinctly as possible, tell us your kind of 3 main highlights or takeaways from your discussion. Yeah? Okay. Let's start with my friend Diane over there.
Oh, we haven't done our 3.
Oh, not ready. Okay, Diane's going to be fueling the plane while flying it. So, how about Arlene or Brian?
Yep.
Okay, how do you ensure the safety of children when working in environments or with third parties where you don't have full control over the program? The 3 points: 1, setting up a prior discussion or written understanding where you're going to be working, so to try and do it as much as you can preventatively to create that safe space. 2, create an environment where people can speak up, such as the children, if there is any sort of incident. And then 3, how you handle any sort of response. If you see something or if you're told something, how you react, and hopefully make a change so that that sort of either behavior or action doesn't happen again.
Succinct enough?
All right, that was succinct. That definitely was. Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for this group about this issue, or anyone want to add anything else to this? No? Okay, Steve, your group?
I'm going to read out the question and then Steve's going to summarize what we talked about. But the questions were, how do you measure the effectiveness or improvement of your protection and inclusive work? How do you know you're making your program safer?
So yeah, we all have child protection policies in this group, but measuring it is a lot harder, we found. And we came up with some ideas about how we could do it, not necessarily what we do now. One key one was getting feedback from the participants and building up some indicators around how safe they feel in the programme, whether they've been subjected to bullying, this type of thing, and then track those indicators over time. Another area is around our staff and their knowledge of the child protection policy. So quite often people are trained in a policy when they arrive, but do they actually remember that 6 months down the line? We could do that and do some refresher training based on their knowledge at different intervals.
Great, thank you. Anyone else from the group want to add anything? Are you pretty satisfied with that? Okay, this group here, Diane?
When organizations, thank you, Diane Huffman. And our question is, when organizations have child protection policies and processes in place, there is a chronic problem of low reporting. So the organizations have everything in place, but there's no or limited reporting. The safeguarding systems exist, but it's not used regularly. What are some of the most prominent reasons why this happens? And what solutions do you have to address these barriers? This was our questions. So I would say that we have 3 areas, the top 3 priority areas would be 1, children are shy and worried about the consequences of reporting on a senior or someone that's important to them. So regardless of the policies that are in place, there's this they're shy and nervous about the whole thing. So the second thing about that, before I go into the solutions, is the normalization of violence in our societies. It's accepted. Hitting a child as a form of discipline is acceptable. Yelling as a coach is acceptable. There's, some of these unfair practices are just normal in the general culture. Children, I guess one of the things was, in terms of that, children are seen and not heard. So they're hid it as a part of discipline. And the third area was often, what are the consequences? We have our policies in place, but do we have what the consequences are? Are they defined based on the severity of the abuse of the policies? And this is a concern to people in terms of reporting on each other or children themselves reporting, because they don't know what are going to be the consequences to the person I'm reporting on. And maybe our colleagues don't understand that either. Often the policies are there, but the consequences are limited or maybe too severe for what people feel is the actual abuse. So some of the things that we had recommended in terms of solutions for these three areas are, one, that children have to be educated very thoroughly and in interesting, fun ways on what their rights are. Because most children don't understand that hitting is a form of abuse, or that being yelled at is harassment in different forms. They don't realize what their rights are. Also, that in terms of our policies and developments, we really have to understand what a severity, what the consequences are going to be, and we have to educate everybody at all levels in terms of what the consequences for our actions are going to be. And in terms of a third area, I think one of the key things is that possibly there needs to be a system of reporting that isn't necessarily within your own organization, so that people can confidentially know the Childline phone number, that it's there, it's posted all over, and maybe the reporting shouldn't be coming directly to you. It goes to the outside agency, who then will determine when and who they would then report the information to. And that would be at all levels, from staff to staff, from coach to staff, from child to coach, etc. So those are our solutions, and sorry I took so long.
That's okay, thank you, really insightful stuff, appreciate that. Yeah, kids are smart, right? People are invested in the program. Kids are, coaches are for their jobs, staff members are, volunteer members are for their status in the community. If we feel like our programs are going to be at risk by reporting our own personal incident, there's a good chance that that's going to keep us quiet, keep our teammates quiet. So it's complicated how we get to the other end of that. Thank you. Okay, how about this group? Sorry, I don't know your name.
Hello everyone. I want to have some question. Actually, we are working for children who are street workers, and they are supporting their family, and they're selling plastic, boot polishing in Afghanistan. And we have a lot of this kind of kids. Mostly while they are accepted in an organization which is supporting them, and they're afraid to raise their sound that what's happened to them, and in this reason they cannot say anything about the situation which has happened to them. They're afraid that they will be rejected and they will be taken out from this center, and they will not have this support and whatever exists in this center anymore. How can we prevent this situation from after overcome conflict country like Afghanistan and some other countries in the world?
Okay, thank you. And do you mind to just read your question, and if there's any other thoughts about your question, just so they know the context of your conversation?
Yes. How do you maintain the consistency and respect for the safety and inclusive throughout all levels of the organizations?
Okay, great. Anything else to add from group members?
No.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, let's move over here. please introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your organization so we know who you are.
Good evening. My name is Randolph Fernandez from Modi Care Foundation. The question is, how does accommodation for girls' safety in your program differ from accommodation of boys' safety? What about female staff, volunteers, and male staff and volunteers? As we got talk about approach here, it's not different. We don't bias. We don't have a biased approach on the basis of girl and boy, but we have a more gender-sensitized approach. We make it a point that they stay in different accommodations, boys and girls. The facilities for girls should be slightly closer to wherever they're staying, like washroom, like wash basins. If they got to walk by, they be accompanied by a female teacher. And staff allotment is done in a team of a male and a female both together. And I think that's about it actually. I think you can want to fill up something.
It's for a group of children, like there are girls and boys accommodation is separate. So for a group of girls, a girl staff will be allotted with them in a dormitory or a room if they are staying outside. And then if a staff are traveling with a group of children, then it is also, we have to see whether a male staff is accompanying a female participant, female staff. So this is the gender-sensitive approach is taken care of. But otherwise, male and female, both children are given equal respect and care because they are also equally vulnerable to all kind of situations.
Thank you. Okay, one more group here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Zubair from AFL India. So my question is, how do you ensure the reality of children's perceptions or experience of safety are central to process of creating protections? So first thing is that we should create a right space from children to vocalize what are the problems they are facing. First we should get the gaps between them, coaches and children, so that they can ensure and they tell us what are the problems they are facing in day-to-day life. The second is we should, after getting these points, we should talk to their parents regarding the issues. If any societies are including it, the parents are the most important person who plays an. And third is, once the point has been raised, we should find a proper solutions and make children's safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the group members to add? No. Okay. Yeah, please.
Set up.
Yeah, I'm talking going forward, I just want to add something in common because I think child protection policy that is obviously to protect the child, but it's also to protect the staff, volunteers, the elders who might be in. So to make sure that they will be not wrongly accused, because there will be some situation will be taken by child abuse, but it's not. So it's also to protect the elders. So that is the point that I just want to add.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I think we need to, consider this issue in ecosystems, not in, we call it child protection, and really the safeguarding sport and thinking about, referees. I was hearing an anecdote yesterday about a referee that made a contentious call during a football match and was basically lynched by the crowd. It was just such an extreme example of someone outside of the kids that needs to be covered by our process in some way. And it might not be that it's as, policy is one step, but it's also about the process and the support and what happens afterwards. So, okay, Kellyanne?
Yeah, our question was, one of the coaches' job of the coach is to encourage children to excel and fitness development. How can we ensure that coaches are not pushing children too far and compromising the physical or emotional safety of the children in the program?
So our points are training your coaches in listening capabilities so they know there's more than one way of training and working with children. Treat the coaches the same way as you want them to treat the participant. That's very important. If you shout at your coaches and you don't reward their skills, well, they're likely to do the same with the participants. use a strength-based approach. You know, you work with people's strength to build on their strength rather than saying you're a cool runner. You know, you work with what they're able to do, and you need to impart that culture amongst everyone in the organization. And lastly, have a flexible approach, tailor-made to the participants. No one trained and responds the same way. So you need to have people who have the capability and to be smart to know that there's different ways of engaging with people to get the best out of people.
Yeah, very helpful stuff. Good. Well, we are 5 minutes over, so thank you so much for all of your input. I think, you know, the bottom line for me here is that this is where the progress is made. That this, in terms of child protection and making sports safe and inclusive, we will never solve the problem. Having a policy is an important step. It does not solve the problem. The real conversation, the discourse, the sharing, the strategies, the being specific, the exchange, the being honest, the failing, admitting you failed and figuring out how to fix that, that is where progress happens for individual program sites, for organizations, for countries, for sectors. And I just really want to, I think, you know, the plenary is great, but this is where the work is done, in these kind of conversations. So I think over the past few years, we've made incredible progress in really just coming out of the closet about stuff that's happening and recognizing that our funders won't necessarily go away. And as funders, we have a responsibility to make sure sport is safe, and we're doing our due diligence. We're putting lines in budgets for, you know, working on these kinds of things, and staff hours and child protection officers and so forth. So before we leave, I just want to quickly share with you a couple resources that are out there. So a key to Women Wins ethos is that we help cross-pollinate ideas, that we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. That's what happens so often in sport for development, in anything, in curriculum, in M&E, in coach training, is that we work in silos in rural areas or right next to each other in urban areas in the same community sites. But we do it our way and you do it your way. And as such, we all move slowly. And if we're able to reduce the redundancy of our work and the silo effect and connect and share what we have, potentially we can evolve faster. And we can do better for more kids, because there are hundreds of millions of kids that need what we do. So with that said, here's just a few of the resources that are out there. The Drawing the Line game. So everybody has a card or had a card on their seat. Unfortunately, I need to ask you to leave them here. But that was a game that we came up with to talk to kids through the ASOP project and Going to School India and all of the partners that were part of ASOP, to talk to kids about inclusion and protection issues and get their feedback. So there's actually a really fun game that goes with it. I don't have time to show it to you, but this is a picture of some of the Magic Bus team actually playing that game. And it's a fantastic training tool, conversation starter for kids. And you also get a bunch of data with it to see where your kids are in terms of what's important to them, where they're not feeling safe and so forth. There's about 35 different scenarios on the cards, and you have kids kind of rate them and talk about them. So that's one. The top right there, girlsportguides.org, that's Women Wins International Guideline for Designing Sport Programs for Girls. This tool that's in there is not girl specific, but there is a whole section on safe spaces and how to do that with kids, how to think about emotional and physical safe space from a practitioner perspective. So this is all crowdsourced from the field. And there's also a checklist, a self-assessment checklist for child protection and gender inclusion specifically. So all that stuff is free and open. There's a group in the UK, there's a UK safeguarding sport group. Well, it's just safeguarding sport, it's a global group, but it was kind of headed up and the steering committee is in the UK. There's a group called Keeping Children Safe that's part of that group that has incredible tools that they developed for the UK and have been developing over the course of over a decade. So it's free, those toolkits are free and they're online. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And I also have to point out that Right to Play, I don't know how available this is to share. I think it is Nat, there's Nat. They created a curriculum, a training of trainers, a workshop for called Creating a Safer World. That's excellent. It's actually it's the programmatic approach that Vivek was talking about. So totally encourage you to hook up with Nat if you want to get access to that. Otherwise, check online. And I wish we had more time for this conversation. So I really applaud the progress that you guys have made. I appreciate your engagement, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I see someone's Macintosh charger that they don't want to go home without right here.